The category of special ammo sidearms was initially introduced in the 30th anniversary event with the introduction of the Forerunner, which was essentially just a beefed up sidearm ode to the original Halo Magnum, which again was literally just a larger, higher caliber sidearm, so it would take special ammo just to make up for the additional damage per shot. Then they introduced the Buried Bloodine, which came with the Warlord's Ruin dungeon aside the Season of the Wish dungeon, which introduced another subfamily of the rocket-assisted pistols, which in its own arc is far more consistent, in my opinion, than to the Buried Bloodlines itself, which is functionally in that same subfamily, and I'll get into that in just a second. But let me explain to you what Buried Bloodlines is, just in case you are of the uninitiated. Basically, another, again, special ammo sidearm, a void-firing double-shot tracking bolt. That is pretty much just the description. It fires 2 bolts that leech health. It has a ability that on multi-kill it grants Devour, and with the exotic catalyst, Devour can allow weakening. But aside from that, its main performance hems from the basic Hungering Quarrel perk, where it has twin firing tracking bolts. Now, this isn't like Two-Tailed Fox where it's one after the other. Unfortunately, these do fire side by side when they actually come out, which results in some odd natures when hitting targets either fails or only 1/2 hits, or in terms of actual targets, 1/2 crits, the other doesn't, resulting in lesser damage. Because again, these do have tracking on these bolts, but they do feel quite loose. Because if you actually notice with the general crosshair, there is an outline around the general crosshair that seems to be that is where it actually initiates tracking. And it's really hard to follow typically how often the tracking actually takes place, because usually it's literally hit or miss, and these fly too fast in combat to see them self-correcting in air. So it makes me wonder why there hasn't been a let's just say a buff to the tracking, or at least the consistency, because there has been many a times that I've noticed that in combat only 1/2 hits or no hit happens even though it's in crosshair, or like I said, there is partially crit, partially body, or just straight body when I'm trying to aim for the head, but because of the air quotes tracking, it looked for something different. And from that point, another reason why it might be a bit inconsistent is, of course, in the variety between that and the rocket-assisted subframes. And again, if you don't know what they do, basically self-propelled rocket ammunition from sidearms. It functions almost nearly the same, just with a little bit of a projectile time to travel, which is more inherently consistent because, again, explosives. The Buried Bloodlines doesn't have any explosion to it. It is literally just 2 shots because it is like akin to crossbow bolts. But from that point, that is a source of also inconsistency because they are critable, which means some shots to the body will do less damage and inherently just can miss and seem to not come with as much pop compared to, you know, an actual explosion. From that point, though, the tracking on rocket pistols seems far more consistent in actual action than the tracking bolts of Buried Bloodlines, which again, it could be because it travels so fast, which Buried Bloodlines, you can see it move. And from that point, I know I've seen shots across the field, especially with like the variety and the jumps. I've seen them course correct far better than I've ever been able to see Buried Bloodlines actually course correct in combat. But aside from that, again, I'm not shitting on Buried Bloodlines. I don't think it is a bad exotic. I think it needs some tweaking. If anything, it might need a lowering of projectile velocity so that the tracking can be a bit more consistent, or just better tracking in general, or maybe even just hit detection. Because again, if it's supposed to be a tracking bolt, if I aim for the head, it should hit for the head. Or if anything, at least have a wider cone of tracking ability, because at that point, even if it doesn't hit the head, mayhaps it aim for the body in a little bit of an aspect, or possibly rework it so that it has a slight explosive impact, or even a proximity detonation from that point. Then again, these are just ideas to possibly improve its consistency. I don't think it inherently needs it, but I definitely feel like the exotic feels way less useful than the basic legendary version, unless you're looking for a Devour or easy weakening build with Prismatic. Because that is essentially all I've been using it for, is building it up so I can have easy weaken on my Devour Warlock. With that though, that has been everything I wanted to say. Again, I am not saying Buried Bloodlines is bad. It might just need some tweaks to its tracking profiles and its consistency to make it meet up with the other legendary rocket assisted frames, to make it consistent compared to their legendary babies. At that point, my name is TheMadScorpyon. I will see you in the next video.